Today's program, I think you're going to enjoy. It's a little off the current events, so to speak, beaten path. Not that we focus that much, but obviously here in 2020 with who knew this was all going to be happening, we're going to be talking with a woman who had her own, shall we say, pseudo coronavirus. We sometimes think that we're in a life that is just ideal. Oh, man, I've often said this. I feel that I have always been in the right place at the right time in my life, whether it came to jobs or relationships. Yes, I've been divorced once. Never again, I'm just telling you. And then all of a sudden something comes along and says, there's something missing. I just don't know what it is. Well, our guest, Rebecca Thompson, is going to be sharing with us about her journey, her adventure, if you will, as she has done so in a couple of books here. Rebecca Rising, which is how I found courage and self-love through friendships, coaching, and conversations with the moon. We'll find out what that's all about, as well as another book that is tied to this, Sunday at 8:30. Now, I don't know if that's 8:30 a.m. or p.m. We will find out. It's basically 2 decades of life planning. And again, Rebecca Thompson is my guest. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Richard, thank you for having me. It's my very great pleasure to be here.
As I mentioned at the outset of the program, we all seem to reach that crossroad where we've been doing what we've been doing and sort of having fun at it. It's been okay, but there's this something comes along and nags at us and says there's something missing. Is that basically the gist, if you will, of your story, of the beginning of your journey, that you had this wonderful life, great career, family, husband, the whole thing, the kids, and the house and the car, and I would say what we might call the American dream. And then something changed. Talk to us about that initial moment or moments.
All those things that you said are true, Richard. I had seemingly the perfect life, and I had grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania and raised in the Presbyterian Church, and went off to college at Penn State and majored in engineering, and met my college boyfriend, and we got married and moved to Rochester, New York, where we both got engineering jobs, and we had a house and dog and started raising 3 kids and literally put up the white picket fence, and everything was going along fine until all at once it wasn't. And my now ex-husband at that time had started his own business, and it began to fail, and the economy was just in a bad place, and his business wasn't going well, and so he began to drink heavily. And his clients weren't paying, and so we weren't paying our bills, so our finances weren't in very good shape. And he ended up getting a job, and we moved to another state. And I thought, this is going to be fine. It's going to be a fresh start. Everything's going to be great now. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. He was pretty caught up in his drinking by then, and he ended up getting not 1 but 2 DUIs. He lost a job, then another, and things just seemed to continue to go downhill from there.
Hmm. So what were your thoughts during this period of time? It'll eventually get better, or I better start bailing because looks like it's going.
It's funny you should ask that, because I had a lot of different thoughts in my head. I was raised in this small town kind of Christian environment where you stayed married for life, and so I thought that was my role, to stay married and I'll support my man and go where he goes and all that. And but at the same time, I was unhappy and frustrated because things weren't getting any better. He wasn't changing his behaviors, and our finances were getting worse. And I was trying to keep things normal for the kids, as much as I could. So I did have a lot of conflicting voices in my head, and I would say, I embarked on this, what I see now as a spiritual journey. I didn't know it was then, but I kind of was just looking for something. I was what. Yeah, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do, and so I was kind of reaching out in a lot of different directions.
So I'm curious as to the network, family, friends, neighbors, whoever. Where were they through all of this?
Um, Depending on how close my circle was, my very, very close circle, and my best friend Darlene, and I talk about quite a bit in my book, she knew what was going on all along, and it was very, very close to her. The kind of outer circle, just neighbors and, parents of my kids' friends and that kind of thing, would have just still said I had this perfect life going on. And even now, when the book came out, and members of my book club that I was in at that time have bought the book and read it and contacted me and said, "You had no idea you were going through all that at the time." So I was keeping up the facade pretty good, unless you were really in my inner circle.
I remember after my divorce and getting through all of that and kind of moving on, sitting down with my parents, and they said, well, we kind of knew that, this was coming and this and that and the other thing. And my first reaction was, well, why the hell didn't you say something? Why didn't you, obviously,
Yes.
'cause when we're in it, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees, even though I certainly was aware that things were just not going the way I wanted, just like your experience. And my folks basically said, look, it's your life and you're the one that has to make the decisions. And we, as your parents, have made the decision. And bear in mind, I come from a family of a total of 6 siblings here, five siblings plus myself. Can you imagine my parents getting anywhere near involved in all 6 relationships? I think they made the right decision to stay out of it.
For their own sanity.
For their own sanity, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. That's so great, though, that you had their support. Because my father was deceased by the time that this happened, but my mother adored my ex-husband, and so she, you know, continues to. Why can't you get along with him? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Although she was aware of his drinking, and she was not approving. I came from a family where people didn't drink, and so they were always a little disturbed by the level of both of our drinking, because he and I would open a bottle of wine after dinner and stuff like that, and my parents did not do. But she did love him. But it's funny what you said, that they knew, because I remember telling my brother, when I told my brother that I was getting divorced, he said something like, well, that was just a matter of time, or something like that. Like your reaction is like, well, I had no idea that you thought that.
Well, I remember one, and I believe it was possibly the Thanksgiving prior to the year. I think it was '97 Thanksgiving. I was in my parents-in-law's house. We were having Thanksgiving at their house, and my mother-in-law, basically, she came up to me and she says, "I'm really sorry that you're having to go through this," because she could see what was happening. And then, of course, we went through the whole process. I never spoke to them again, but what really broke my heart was when her father, my father-in-law, I guess you might say former father-in-law, passed away. And then my former mother-in-law passed away 4 months after him due to a broken heart. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was never called. I didn't find out until 2 or 3 years later, when I just happened to call her, my ex-wife, just to see how she was doing, see what was happening and so forth. And she's sharing all of this. And I got really angry. I didn't direct it at her. I was seething inside. God, 15 years and nobody calls. We spent 15 years together. Well, now we've been apart since '98. So it's been 22 years. But it's like, how do you spend time with someone and then have little or no consideration? Now, they may say the same thing about me because of the way things unfolded back in '98, but nonetheless, I realized that all of this kind of stuff has really got to be tough. But you had an extra, we'll call it, challenge. You had kids. Now, were they young at the time, in their teens? What was the
Um,
situation there, and how did they handle all of this? Because again, yeah, I would venture you probably did what you could to, I don't know, hide it or at least minimize it, so that it wasn't as an effect on them and their schooling and their friends and those kinds of things.
yeah, there were a lot of challenges when we first when we took the first job and we moved out of state. We moved from Rochester, New York to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a huge thing to do with kids anyway, right? To make a move, and the two older ones were in high school, and the younger one was in middle school. So difficult ages all around
Yeah.
to make a move like that. And you know, and I had hoped it would be a fresh start, but unfortunately, their father's drinking just continued to escalate, and they were aware of it. I think at first, I mean, he was never a violent drinker, a violent drunk ever. What he would do is just drink till he passed out, and so he'd just kind of be quote sleeping in his chair. And so the kids would kind of get him to say funny things. He'd be sort of quote dozing or semi-conscious, and so at first it was funny for them. They'd be like, "Oh, let's get Dad to say funny things," and then they gradually realized this was not, this wasn't cool. They didn't want to bring their friends around a lot. I think it was hard for them in those years that they wanted to keep their friends away from our home, and I felt bad about that as well.
I'm curious. Here we are today. I'm not sure what the time frame is between then and now, but how old are your kids today? And is there any relationship of any kind, even estranged, if you will, between you and your ex-husband?
Um, we've been apart for 4 years, and I do not connect with him at all. I've had no contact with him for at least 2 years. My kids are now 32, 30, and almost 27, and they keep in touch with him, birthdays and Father's Day and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't say they have a super close relationship, but they keep in touch with him.
Yeah. So, what about your family on your side? Siblings, obviously, parents. As you say, your father's passed, but what about within the context of the relationship of the marriage? Were your parents alive and siblings? Were they in any way, shape, or form aware of and or supportive of you in terms of just getting through from day to day? Hang in there, it'll be okay. Things will get better. Blah blah blah. As opposed to you need to leave him.
No, no, I probably had more of that from my friends. My mother was alive, but as I said, she really liked my ex a lot and thought highly of him and was concerned about the drinking. But I don't recall ever talking to her about my marriage, about it being a problem or anything like that. Um, my brother, I have one brother, but he's my only sibling. He lives in Missouri, so he was always a considerable distance from me. And we kept in touch, but he wasn't really aware of it. Well, he was more aware of them than I thought, because he told me he wasn't surprised when we announced we were getting divorced. But so no, I wouldn't say my family really was a big part of it. It was more my close circle of friends, and I do mention several of them in my book. That were the support system I had through my friends.
Do you feel that that is, regardless of how your relationship might be going, even if it is going well, what are your feelings about establishing that kind of a network of friends and friends who are there not just to support you, to be yes people, but sometimes to call you on your stuff?
Yes, there are different kinds of friends for different things I have found, and I have wonderful friends in every place that I've lived. And I'm an introvert, and I don't make friends quickly or super easily. It takes me a while to kind of open up to anybody, and but once I do, I feel like I make friends for life. I have two very close friends in Rochester, New York, and one my friend Darlene, who I mentioned quite a bit in the book, and so we talk every week. We talk every week on the phone, and she's one, she's very logical, and she'll lay out, what are the pros and cons. And when I was talking about whether I should leave him, like go with him when he was moving out of state, or should I stay where I was and separate my family, she got out a piece of paper and was writing down what are the pros and cons and the logic of the situation, and then I had a different friend that if I just wanted to cry, and just wanted somebody to, humor me no matter what I said. And so I had my logical friend and I had my emotional friend,
Yeah. So, what are some of the basic lessons that you have learned through this process of, I guess maybe the best way to put this is becoming your own woman?
Oh, I've learned so many things. I would say, the biggest thing was learning to love myself, which is a huge statement. And when I would first heard that, I would have thought, what does that even mean? But what it has come to mean to me is learning to put my own needs ahead of others sometimes. That I was always the person who I always would say I kept all the balls in the air. I made sure the bills got paid. I made sure the kids had everything they needed to take to school, and I made sure the house was managed, and I found my ex's car keys when he lost them. And, I solved everybody's problems and took care of everything, but I didn't always take care of myself. So sometimes learning to say no, learning to just, shut off the world and go light a candle and take a bath or something. Just learning self-love is a huge thing. Another thing I love is to trust myself, to trust my own judgment, which I was very torn. I think I told you earlier, I had a lot of different voices in my head telling me, some were telling me you should stay with him, and some were telling me you should go, and I didn't know what to listen to. And friends were telling me, I had friends who did say, why don't you just leave? Why don't you? And but I couldn't. I wasn't ready. And when I was ready, I knew it, So I think you just have to trust your own instincts and intuition and not worry so much about what other people think. My mother definitely wouldn't have thought I should leave him, but I couldn't worry about what my mother thought or what my friends thought. Or what he thought. I was always worried he would be really angry, or I would never speak up about things that upset me because I was so afraid he would be angry. And I've learned now, you just gotta look out for yourself. You gotta be true to yourself. Is what I mean by that. You gotta be true to yourself.
What was the impetus for you putting this down in print and sharing it with the rest of the world? As an introvert, I would think that would have been a very difficult decision and choice to make.
Yeah, it was a little scary getting it out there, right? Everybody's hearing my business. Right? And as I said, I had friends that approached me saying, we had no idea. We had no idea. It was a little scary, and I think my kids were a little concerned about what I was going to say. They knew I was writing it. They didn't really want to talk about it because they were nervous about what I was going to say. Well, several reasons. I mean, I've kept journals for years, and so I had a lot of notes. And you mentioned the other book, Sunday at 8:30, and that's the one I wrote with my friend Darlene. And I said we talk on the phone every week, and we've been doing that for almost 20 years. And that's the title of the book comes from. We kind of landed on that time. That's when we talk to each other. Sunday evenings, you asked earlier, AM or PM. It's 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, so it's 5:30 for me in California here. But we had started to write a book about our process. We called that book, it's about life planning. And years ago, we took a class together in life planning, and we started using what we learned. And over the years, we've made it our own process, changed it quite a bit from what we originally learned, but we stuck with it. And a lot of people were telling us, wow, you've been doing something for 20 years, you should write a book about that. So we started doing that. And we set goals, our life planning process, we set goals in a lot of different areas, whether it's our health, mental, career, family, all these different things. And one of the areas is spiritual. So I've been going through, as part of my healing process and learning to love myself and finding the strength to end my marriage, I've gone through a lot of different spiritual practices that I've learned about. And so my friend Darlene, that was writing the book with, said, you really ought to write a chapter about your spiritual journey for our book. So I started writing it, and I said to her, I think this is more than a chapter. I think it's a whole book in itself. So that's really how Rebecca Rising came to be. It started out as a chapter in the other book and ended up being a whole book all on its own.
Well, I encourage people to go to Rebecca's website, Evolve Without Limits. evolvewithoutlimits.com is her website. We encourage you to go there to find out more about Rebecca, as well as the two books that she currently has out. Number one, Rebecca Rising, and the other one, of course, is, as you just mentioned, Sunday at 8:30. And it's 2 decades of life planning. And it's both you, Rebecca Thompson, as well as Darlene Ryan. And you've written, of course, the other one, Rebecca Rising. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Rebecca. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Don't you go away. We've got a lot more coming up.
Tell me your stories. I'll do my best to understand you.
And welcome back to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, along with Rebecca Thompson. And we're talking about the work that she has put out called Rebecca Rising, about her journey through the same process that a whole bunch of people have gone through. And, you've got to sit there and wonder, what in the Sam Hill were we thinking in the first place, that we thought that this was a good idea? It seemed like a good idea at the time. Felt good, felt right. I have to say that in my evaluation of my first marriage, I realized that there was a reason why we got married. My reason was because at that time, for some reason, I guess I needed somebody to take care of. And I almost got my wish, so to speak, because it is possible, even though I was married in Arizona, it's a community property state, I was actually taken to court, and it was possible that I could have wound up with spousal support for God knows how long, but that didn't happen. So I'm wondering, from your standpoint, first of all, how long did the process take from the time you decided, I'm out, I'm done, it's over, until you got the papers from the court saying it's done, it's over, and you're out?
It was a little over 2 years.
2 years.
So, what was much, much longer was just my getting there that I wanted out. Took forever. It took years and years. And so I was going through this constant struggle of, should I stay or should I go?
There's a song in there somewhere. There's a song.
I know, right? Too bad I wasn't the first one to think of that. But yeah, once I made up my mind, I went to see an attorney, and at that time he was unemployed. That's what we were getting into this cycle of, ever increasing unemployment because of this ongoing drinking. And she said, you should wait to do anything until he gets a job, because otherwise you will be paying spousal support. So I tried to do that. I waited a few months. That was in February. And in June, I think it was, I called her again and said he had gotten a job, kept it for 3 weeks, lost it. And then I was like, I'm done. Really. The defining moment was, I got up one morning, it was 7 a.m. and he had a beer in a coffee mug, 7 in the morning. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, don't worry about it. And I said, could you honestly say that if I was sitting there drinking beer at 7 in the morning, that you wouldn't worry about it? And he said, well, no, blah, blah. But that was when it was, I can't do this anymore. So, I called the lawyer and said, I need to move forward on this. Yeah. And I was sued for spousal support, and it didn't take. I am not paying spousal support, thank goodness. It was fun for a while there, but
well, yours went on a lot longer. Yours went on a lot longer than mine. I did not realize that it's considered a lawsuit. I did not know that at the time. Divorce was divorce. I didn't know someone was suing you. And that is, of course, the legal terminology. And I was actually served on the first day of May of 1998. Mm-hmm. And I remember when they came in, it was in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock, maybe 2:30 in the afternoon. They walked in and they asked for Richard Dugan. And I said, yes, how can I help you? And the gal walked up, the person, I think it was a gal or a guy, walked up with a manila envelope, handed it to me and said, "You've been served." And I'm going, what? I thought I was being sued by somebody else, for something else. And of
Yeah.
course, it turns out it was the divorce papers. I was actually able to make a joke even in that day, on that day. Oh, now there's a new meaning for me for May Day.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
And of course, for me, the first month, the May, I was in my emotions the entire month. I just couldn't think. I couldn't process. I couldn't believe what was happening and so on and so forth. And of course, I went to a female attorney whose slogan, oh, I loved this woman's slogan: reasonable solutions for reasonable people.
Oh.
Fortunately, my ex-wife's attorney was anything but reasonable. Anyway, and I was helped a little by my parents. They actually paid the initial retainers so that I could retain this woman for the divorce process. And by January, what was it, 11th of the following year, I had the document in my hand stamped that it was all over. So
That's
from that
wonderful.
standpoint, it was nice and short.
Yes. That's great.
But yeah, but I learned a lot of lessons. One very important lesson was when you're going through a divorce, which I don't need the lessons because I'm not going to do that ever again. I refuse to divorce. The woman I am with now, I will do everything in my power to make things work. I'm not going to sell my soul or anything of that nature, but I'm just saying that I am going to work a lot harder this time around because I don't want to go through that. It's just horrendous. And she was with me through that process. And she even divorced her husband during that period, or actually a year or two after. And they did it so amicably. There was no attorney involved. It was all, they did over the phone. They exchanged the papers through the mail kind of stuff, signed off. I don't think it cost her more than $150, whereas it cost me $3,600. It took me 2 years to pay it off to the attorney, But these are the experiences that we go through. And I'm curious, yours it is quite profound in one sense. And I'm curious, how is your experience different from everybody else's that, again, you felt compelled to share it in Rebecca Rising?
Well, what I started out writing about was, I thought, my spiritual journey. And so I started writing about the fact that I had gone to Reiki classes and psychics and learned about tarot and crystals and shamanic journeying. And, so and I went to a writing workshop. And so there was a coach that was working with us at this workshop. And she said, it's all well and good that you've found all this stuff, but I don't really understand why. Like, what's the compelling reason that you started doing all this stuff? And as I started to explore that, I realized it was about finding out who I was and finding my own power, finding my strength to wake up and get out of this marriage, which was going nowhere and not getting any better. And I was staying in there because I felt powerless. I felt stuck. Didn't realize I could change it. I just thought, this is my life. This is how it is. And as I went through these various experiences spiritually, I started to change my belief systems and realized that I could indeed change my life and have something more for myself. And so I think I wanted to share that story for other people who may be feeling stuck and feeling like they don't have the power to change things in their lives. So that was really why, and as you said, I'm an introvert, I'm a private person. It's not about just having my business, splashed all over the place, but it's more about, if this can be helpful to anyone else, I would love to be able to help.
When I talk with people and they start talking about their parents, their fathers or mothers, and they start giving information about them and who they were and what they're all about and so forth, I start thinking about my father. And my father's still alive, 89 this year. My mother, 86 this year. and still alive and kicking and doing very well, staying in the house, not going anywhere so that they don't they don't have any problems. But I can't sit here and talk to you about my father's inner workings per se, because he was also a very private person. I mean, especially when it came to spiritual things, not so much religious in terms of, well, he was Protestant, and when he married my mother, she was Catholic, so he converted, and that's how they raised us kids. But more the spiritual, metaphysical, if you will, aspects, similar to what you were just talking about in terms of going to psychics and shamans and getting Reiki training and so on and so forth. I don't know that much about. I mean, I know he believes in, I guess, a supreme being, higher power, a God, but I don't know the details. And in one sense, I guess that's okay. I know that he is open-minded to metaphysical concepts, very interested in. I mean, we've had conversations, the four of us, my wife and I, and my parents. We've had some incredible conversations about some of these subjects, a lot of the other subjects. My wife and I are Reiki masters, as a matter of fact.
How are you? That's great.
I'm curious now, when you would go to see these different people who were giving you insight, shall we say,
Mhm.
was the information that they were giving you new to you, or was it telling you stuff that you had already known, maybe just confirming for you, yep, you're right, you are on the right track?
For the most part, it was that. For the most, and sometimes it was things I was in denial about. But once it was placed, once the mirror was held up to my face, right, then it was like, oh, yeah, I should have known that, or I did know that, and I've not been paying attention, or I've not wanted to see it. So yes, and many times it was stuff that really wasn't surprising that I either knew or should have known.
So, in terms of your upbringing, and how did you transition from your upbringing, if there was even one, to where you are today? Because obviously you seem to have quite a fairly deep spiritual life or walk, if you will. It may not be tied to a particular group or denomination or sect or what have you, but I'm curious as to that progression for you as you were growing up, and maybe even going into the marriage and so forth.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned I was raised Protestant in the Presbyterian church, and I was always somebody who liked going to church. I sang in the choir and taught Sunday school and all that stuff. I don't, you're talking about your parents, and I didn't have those kinds of conversations with my parents either. Church was something you should do. Everybody goes to church. Nice people go to church.
Nice people. I like that.
If I had to sum up my mother's philosophy of religion, that would be nice people go to church. You don't want people to think you're not nice, so you go. And she's a good person, very nice lady. And my dad was very active in the church and the community. And again, I think it was he's a very service-oriented man. He was looking at every organization, and he'd be in it for a year. Next thing you know, he'd be president, the Kiwanis Club, or, whatever it was, he was doing that. So it was all about service for him, and organization, very good organizer. But we didn't have those kind of conversations about spirituality or anything like that. But it was very gradual to change out of that. Part of it was I was very active in the Presbyterian church when I was still living in New York. But in my career life, I started to become active as a diversity trainer in my workplace. And I made a lot of gay friends through that, and a lot of people who told me terrible stories about being rejected by their churches, rejected by their families, and it just made me do a lot of thinking about my church, and I didn't want to be part of something that was that painful for people, and rejecting people like that, because I don't believe that's what Jesus would do. So when I moved to North Carolina, I kind of took a shift and I joined the Unitarian church. The Unitarian Universalist is very inclusive. It takes people from all different faith backgrounds, and does not have any rigid doctrine to follow. So I stayed in UU for 7 years, and that's really, I met a lot of different kinds of people, and that's where I got exposed to a lot of people would invite me to a Reiki class or, dowsing class or all different kinds of things, which I had no background in anything metaphysical whatsoever. And I was an engineer, so I was more science oriented, and so I started out thinking this stuff is all wacko, right? There's nothing to this. This is, or people I'd heard of like ESP, and I was like, well, there's certain people that have these kinds of powers, but I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
But I got hooked. I went to, I think the first class I went to was a dowsing class. Didn't know anything about dowsing. I thought that was you take a forked stick and use it to find water, and I didn't know anything. But it was, decision making. I was like, asking the universe questions and, learning the answers using the instruments. And so I didn't, again, I thought you had to have some kind of superpower to be able to do this. But I was able to do it in the class. And I just became fascinated by the movement of energy and knowing that I wasn't doing this, myself. It was through some influence, some force in the universe that wasn't me. And so I just got hooked on it and just kept going to things like that. And movement of energy through Reiki and to promote healing. I mean, it's just fascinating to me.
It has always been fascinating to me too, because I have always been intrigued by these concepts, whether it's in A Course in Miracles or Autobiography of a Yogi or books by Ram Dass or even some of the quantum physics scientists and so forth, be they Hawking or Einstein, who is probably not so much quantum, but just plain old physics. And I heard a phrase or a statement just the other day. We were watching this documentary and the quote was put up, and I can't remember. It was Schrodinger who is quoted as saying, another one. I was introduced through Big Bang Theory, but that's another story for another day. And basically it goes along the lines of, there is only one mind, only one, but there are different aspects of that one mind in each one of us, something along those lines, that helps to explain the diversity of human beings. 8 billion of us. I can't believe we're almost at 8 billion. Wow. I mean, I have trouble with 100,000 people in a place. Although I do remember when I was in New York City in April of 1993 with my first wife, and we were there visiting a dear friend of mine, my best friend I've known since 6th grade. And we were walking around New York, going up and down Fifth Avenue, and wound up in Central Park, walked into Central Park, and all of a sudden we looked off into the distance, and we saw this crowd of people heading our way. And it freaked us out a little bit, thinking, we better get out of this park. We don't know who these people are, what they're here for. Well, it turns out we were there on Earth Day in April. And that was what this crowd was about. And they estimated the crowd when we were watching the news that night, finding out what we could have been involved in. 500,000 people. And I'm going, 500,000 people in this place? Are you kidding me? But we have this diversity, and we have this great expression of the one mind that comes through each one of us, but each one of us has a different facet. Talk to me from your perspective about the people that have come and gone in your life, and that aspect of the connectedness that you had, in some cases still have. I'm sure you're still connected with Darlene.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that. Your perceptions of how we're connected. I mean, even with your now ex-husband, he was in your life for a reason, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You've been able to come to terms and put that into, shall we say, for you, proper perspective.
Yes. So many places to go right now. I love what you said about the one mind, because to me that kind of explains reincarnation, right? Because if we're all one mind, it's not necessarily that we're physically born, one life after another, but that
Mhm.
if we want to look at our past lives, we can kind of tap into that one mind and find a past life of someone that has a lesson for us. That's how I kind of, Jung will call it the collective unconscious, right? But as far as people in my life, and I also believe that we make decisions before we come here into this life about what are the lessons we want to learn, and that souls travel in groups, so we have our besties right throughout eternity that kind of travel with us and help us. We make agreements with them that, what, I'm going to be kind of a mean mom to you in this next life because you need to learn about that lesson or whatever, whatever it is. Or, I'm going to be your alcoholic husband or whatever because you need to learn some stuff. And in return, I'm going to do this, so we it's like a play, we take on the rules for the next life and we learn lessons. So, if you think of it that way, to think somebody would love you that much to come and play out this role, which was not always necessarily a charming role, right?
Mhm.
And you're not going to get kudos for this role. That somebody would love you that much to want your soul to learn lessons, that they would play that part for you. So that's how I look at it. So I've done a lot of forgiveness work on myself for forgiving others in my life. When there's really nothing to forgive. There's nothing that needs to be forgiven because everybody played the part that they were supposed to play and they came to play. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And yeah.
And that's a hard one for a lot of people to take, especially if you put that on every person who has lived in history before us. Okay? And you start listing the famous and the infamous, as well as those who never made it out of their village, shall we say, that every single person was just here to play a role. And again, as I said before, that is a hard one for people to take. I, back in 2016, when I got drawn into the political political mindset and the minutia and all of that, it took me 6 months to get out of that. And when I did, the first phase of the 3 phases I've been through is, teacher, thank you for teaching me how not to behave. The second phase was, I forgive you, but more importantly, I forgive myself for allowing myself to be drawn into this minutia. And the third phase is, what is it that you are so afraid of that it makes you speak and behave this way? I'm not asking you to change. I want to understand. And so I can put you behind me and move on with my life. And that is coming from a strictly non-egotistical human compassion for another human being position. That, again, that person is here to play their role. So who am I to sit here in judgment of them? And unfortunately, I fall into the same trap as everybody else. Okay, I've done it with this person, but this person over here, and it's like, all right, I've got to figure out how to incorporate everybody into not just the national or the international, but the local, or on the state level, but, and that's where the real challenge comes. That's where our real spirituality comes in. That's where those lessons really come in. Have you been able to do that with your ex-husband? In spite of everything that he's done, you've accepted the fact that, oh yeah, okay, that was just his role.
I mean, I'd like to say I have, transcended to that level.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like I say, with him or with other, like you say, public figures that sometimes do things that appall and outrage me, one part of me can transcend and be like, these things are all happening for a reason and it's going to come out of it and, all of that. And then another part is like, wow. So yeah. So,
wow.
I still have anger emerge, you know, from time
Sure,
to time. I get
sure.
struck by something, but yeah, I think that's the
Yeah.
ongoing spiritual journey, right? It's just you keep releasing that. It comes up and you let it go. It comes up and you let it go. It comes up again tomorrow and you let it
Yeah.
go.
For me, it's less anger, more sadness. Sadness that it even happened.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness that I had to go through that and that she had to go through that. I mean, my God, we came together. We decided we were going to love each other. And I really felt like I was on the road to being married as long, if not longer, than my parents, who have just celebrated their 64th wedding anniversary this year, 2020.
Fabulous.
And all of the siblings are still alive. They have grandkids. They even have two great grandchildren, which of course makes me a great uncle, which is kind of cool because I
Very
never
cool.
thought that I would. And I'm not a father. I have no children. But you know that's okay. That's okay. And so yeah, you know, I hear what you're saying. You know, it comes up and you deal with it and then you move on. It comes up and maybe that's maybe that's that process of learning. You think that, okay, I'm not going to get it on the first try, and maybe on the 612th try, you know, or as Jesus said, forgive 70 times 7. Okay, that's 490. uh
Yeah.
we you know we have to do what we can, do the best that we can, and just say, look, you know, okay, I'm working on it. I'm trying to remember that. Oh, you have a script. I have a script. We're players, as Shakespeare said. You know, the world is a stage, and we're just actors. We're just players in this play. You know, and we all have our different roles to play to teach ourselves and to teach others. You read Celestine Prophecy by James Redford?
Yes.
Great
Yes.
message in there. Along these
Mhm.
same lines, we have messages for one another. I love that aspect of it. And we are, I think, obligated as we learn these things that we need to follow through and give those messages to one another. Do you, and usually it's not in a conscious way per se. You know, it's not like, okay, I've got this message I've got to give to this person because it's so important and they need to straighten out their lives. And so I'm going to give that. It doesn't work quite. I don't think it works quite like that.
No.
But I'm
No.
curious as to your observations. And this is, again, I know you haven't had a contact with him for 2 years plus, but I'm just curious. Have you ever been in a place where you were able to impart to him something that made a difference to him, where he sort of realized his role and what he did to the family, to you?
Um, not a lot of that, but I did hear. I wrote him a letter, and he was still. It was right around the time I had asked him to move out, and
Mhm.
then and he was getting ready to move out, and I wrote him quite an extensive letter, and a lot of it was in our marriage. You know, like I said, he wasn't a violent drunk. He just was kind of more of a I'm going to drink till I pass out. So I felt neglected. You know, we didn't talk about things, and if I did want to talk about something, he would just he would just leave the room and go drink. You know, he didn't want to talk to me. So I in my letter I said, you know, I hope in your future relationships that you'll make an effort to communicate, you know, with that individual because I think it would help if we could have talked about some of this stuff. And I can't remember what it was, but I later, I mean, like a year later, um, he came. I was selling our house, and he had to come back and get some stuff, like out of the garage and everything. And he did say something like he was in a relationship then, and he something just made me remember that letter because he said something like he was making an effort to keep communication open, you know, in his new relationship and stuff like that. So you know, that made me feel good. He's just trying to do it a little differently, you know. So,
All right, hold on one second. I got somebody at the front door. Hold on, please.
mhm.
3, 2, 1. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program, Rebecca. You've written a book called Rebecca Rising. Rebecca Thompson is my guest, and she's also written, along with her friend Darlene Ryan, a book called Sunday at 8:30, and we now know it's 8:30 p.m. And we certainly hope that you will go to evolvewithoutlimits.com to find out more. And Rebecca, the one thing I want to first of all invite you to do when we're able to freely move about and connect physically as well, I'd love to invite you to Santa Barbara to continue this conversation in studio. I think it's important to talk about these things, especially in light of where we are today. Now, we could have gone into one direction that I had thought about in this regard, and maybe I'll throw this out to you real quickly. The Me Too movement, which seems to have sort of kind of in a way taken a back seat to the Black Lives Matter movement that's really, and I'm beginning to understand better as a white person can understand what's been going on. And I got to tell you, I cannot believe some of the things that I've seen on television, some of these videos and so forth. But to the Me Too movement, just out of curiosity, how have you felt? Are you feeling empowered these days? Are you the one who's in control of your life more so now, of course, than you were before? Did that experience of the divorce give you more confidence in yourself and your ability to say, you know what, I can do these things. I can
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Richard. Yeah, I definitely did not have confidence, going back 10 years ago, I didn't have the confidence that I could make it on my own. I didn't think I could change my life. Now I know that I can pretty much do whatever I want. And I would rather not be in a relationship than be in one that's going to be diminishing, like the one that I was in. And so, not that I don't want to be in one, because I do, but I won't compromise myself.
And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. It reminds me of there's probably other songs that use the line that well, if she wants to go off and do her own thing, hey, go for it. I'm not going to hold you back. I'm not going to tie you down here. You're your own person before you're my wife and I'm your husband. You're your own person. And I think that a lot of people are beginning to get that message, in spite of the fact that it flies in the face of the quote unquote traditional relationship of marriage. Where you're supposed to be subservient to your husband. What do you think you're doing, Rebecca? You get back with that man and you make it work. Any more than, I stayed, according to my attorney, I should have left after 10 years. I should not have stayed that extra 5 years because it could have played into her favor as far as that was concerned. And I thought, I don't want this to play into her favor or mine. I just want it to be over. I don't want to win and her lose or vice versa. I just want it to be over. I want to be free. And I know that's probably how you felt too, wasn't it?
By the time I got there, right, it wasn't about, I didn't want anything bad to happen to him, and I didn't want to fight. I just didn't want to fight over it. I just wanted to be done with it and just go our separate ways quietly.
I do have to say that one of the humorous parts for me in my divorce, all we had was a house. We had no stocks and bonds and bank accounts in Europe or anything like that. We had a house. That was it. No other assets, no cars. And her attorney decided that he wanted me to, he deposed me. So I had to I'd go to a deposition that lasted about an hour and a half. And of course, my attorney only coached me as we're walking to the building from the parking lot. She says, you have to answer the questions. But, she says, the way that you can sort of slow things down so you have a chance to think about the answer is you can answer the question by saying, I don't understand. Could you be more specific? And things of that nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to get, could you repeat the question? And the funny part for me was when he asked me about the information in one of the documents that I had to fill out, income and expenses document. And I had filled it out. The deposition was in July, and I had to fill out this document from, what was it? I think it was June of the previous year, 12 months. It was a 12-month cycle. So I think it went up to June of that year. And so he asked me this question. He said, is the information in this document accurate? I said, yes. He then asked me the next follow-up question. He says, so you're telling me that the information in this document is accurate for the previous 12 months? I said, no. He didn't understand. So he asked me again. He said, but you said the information in this document was accurate. I said, yes. But it's not accurate for the previous 12 months? I said, no. And that's right. It was, the cutoff was June of 1998. So it went from July of 97 to June of 98, and the deposition was in August. Okay, you get it. You get it. I see the expression on your face. And so I said, can I have the stenographer read back his question? Yeah. Then I would like the stenographer to read back his question. So she did, and he didn't get it. So I had to explain it to him. And I have to say that as bad as I felt walking out of there, I needed a shower bad because I just felt dirty. But my attorney says, I have never seen anybody causing an attorney in a deposition to spin the way you did. So I got kudos from my attorney for spinning the other attorney.
That's great.
But I think that's one of the things that you and I would agree on. You've got to find sometimes the light spaces in there, because it's a dark place to go sometimes, especially if it's an adversarial kind of thing. But again, I thank you so much for joining us. I've got 3 final questions for you before I let you go. But before I ask you those 3 questions, let me remind our listeners that you're listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. This program is broadcast at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Sundays, 1 a.m. on Mondays. And the podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, and a whole bunch of other places. And you can support us through PayPal and Patreon accounts that I've got linked on the homepage as well as the missions page. So question 1 of the 3, and you may have touched upon it during the interview, but I do like to ask the questions straight up front. And the first is, who is Rebecca B. Thompson?
That's an interesting question. I wasn't expecting that one. I am an evolving person that will continue to evolve in any direction I choose, knowing that I have the power to do so.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
I would like other people to know that if they are feeling stuck, they have more power than they know, they have more strength than they know, and if they want to change their life, they can, and that they're worth it.
And what is your life's purpose?
I think my life's purpose is to help other people learn to love themselves.
Rebecca Thompson, I want to thank you again for joining us here on Tell Me Your Story. It's been a great pleasure, and I certainly hope we do get the chance to talk again soon. I want to thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast podcast, love to love.